Hello, thank you for tuning in to Black Political Buzz, and I am Laurel. Today's vlog or video is entitled Don Lemon is CNN's Black Money Making Mr. Bojangles. Today's vlog or video topic is Don Lemon is CNN's Black Money Making Mr. Bojangles. Now, if you have been tuning in to the latest or most recent events in the media, especially in the news, you are aware of an incident that took place in Columbia, South Carolina at a school in which a South Carolina police officer or cop was called to a classroom to speak to a young female teenage student. This girl was this is a girl that's about 13, 14 years old. She's a kid, and she was small in stature. She wasn't like she was like 6 feet tall or 5 feet 8. This young lady was small in stature. Apparently, she was told by her teacher to leave the classroom, and she refused to do so. So when the police officer arrived on the scene in the classroom, the young lady was sitting at her desk. This was a black teenager, a young black female teenager. She was sitting quietly at her desk. The police officer was a tall white police officer. When he entered the classroom, there was no ruckus going on. The young black teenage student, she was not throwing a desk. She was not throwing chairs at anyone. She didn't have any kind of weapons in her hands or throwing books or anything. She wasn't being irate or irrational. She wasn't, causing any kind of disturbance that one could see with the naked eye. So when the police officer, who, like I said, it was a tall white cop, walked into the scene of the classroom, he didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Other than, there was nothing out of the ordinary. But there was a young black female student sitting at her desk quietly. She was sitting there quietly. Now, granted, I don't know what happened before the officer arrived on the scene, but the fact that the officer came to the classroom and the young lady was sitting there quietly when he arrived, that, was a peaceful situation. When he arrived in the classroom and saw her sitting there quietly. Doesn't matter what happened before the officer came to the scene. It doesn't matter. I repeat, it doesn't matter what occurred in the classroom before the officer arrived. When he arrived on the scene, as a law enforcement professional, he witnessed a young black female student sitting quietly at her desk. Now, the officer walked to the student. He walked over to where she was sitting at her desk, and he asked her to please leave the classroom. The student, she quietly refused to leave. She quietly, meaning that she did not get up from her desk. She did not leave her seat, get up from her desk, and walk out of the classroom with the officer. She continued to sit there quietly. The officer then, this tall white officer, then decided to take upon himself to flip this young girl out of her chair, out of her desk, onto the floor. He flipped her. This was a small black female student. This was not a tall female student. He flips this young black girl out of her seat, out of her desk, onto the floor, slams her onto the floor. It was sickening to watch that on video. Oh, and the video of the incident has been released. That's how everyone was able to see exactly what happened. There has been global outrage over this officer's actions against this young girl who was sitting there quietly when he arrived on the scene. And she did not, when he asked her to get up from her seat and leave, she didn't yell at him and curse at him and call him names and say Black Lives Matter. She didn't do any of that. She sat there quietly in peaceful protest, civil disobedience, quietly. Now, I don't advocate students not obeying the law. Please understand that I am not advocating that any student, black, white, whatever your race is, that you should disobey the law or your teacher. However, as a trained law enforcement professional, which a police officer is supposed to be, there is a time and a place. There's a time and a place to use excessive force. This officer, this officer used excessive force on this black young female student. It was unnecessary excessive force. It was unnecessary because she didn't do anything to warrant how he treated her, to get her to comply to his instructions. That was not warranted. So, of course, there's been global outrage, and it's well deserved. That officer should lose his job because that was unnecessary excessive force, and it was also child abuse. That was child abuse. To flip that young girl out of her seat like that, slam her on the floor when she was sitting there quietly. There was another way he could have handled that. He could have talked to that young girl. He could have said, let's talk about it. I mean, I'm aware that a cop is not a psychologist. I'm aware that a police officer is not a licensed or a trained psychologist nor a psychiatrist. However, think about all the times when police officers have talked adults out of committing suicide. Think of all the incidents that have occurred in the USA when police officers were able to talk an adult out of taking their own life. So why couldn't that police officer use some compassion for that student? He doesn't know what type of day that student may have had before she came to school. Many of our children, especially many of our black children, encounter a lot of stress at home. Their parents may be unemployed. This is Obama's economy. Oh, yes, it is. This is President Obama's economy, in which large numbers of black people are still unemployed, including many college-educated, intelligent, capable black citizens, black adults who cannot find work due to racism. But those jobs are going to people from the Middle East or white citizens who, in many instances, in many cases, are maybe less qualified than the black job applicant. This is Obama's economy. So you have, in many black homes today, you have a lot of stress over finances. That stress trickles down to the children in the home. When the parents are going through it, the children go through it too. Except children cannot communicate or handle stress like most adults should. I said should because many adults can't handle stress properly either. But children, and a teenager is a child. I don't care what you all call her. Now, I know that for black children, they want to call black children, who are teenagers, they want to call our children adults. But if it's a white teenage child or a Middle Eastern teenage child, they call them children. No, a child is a child. I don't care if they're black, white, Middle Eastern, Asian, Latino, Native American, Indian. A child is a child. And you deal with a child on a child's level. As a professional, you deal with a child on a child's level. That officer could have talked to that young girl to get her to comply. He didn't have to do that. That was, in my opinion, an act of child abuse and unnecessary excessive force. Now, will he be fired? I don't know. That's South Carolina. They just took down the flag. They just took down the flag a few months ago. I don't know. But that was not right. But Don Lemon thinks it's okay. CNN's co-host, anchor, star anchor, Don Lemon, the black gay guy. Yeah, I'm saying black gay because he is the face of black gay America. He thinks he is anyway. He is the face of black gay America. At least he thinks he is. Well, he said that upon viewing the videotape of the incident, he would need more evidence as to whether or not the officer should lose his job. Don Lemon said that. This black man. Of course, that created more outrage. Now everyone wants Don Lemon to lose his job. There's a petition going out on change.org asking CNN to fire Don Lemon, but it's not going to happen. CNN's not going to fire Don Lemon. Don Lemon is CNN's black money-making Mr. Bojangles. Mr. Bojangles was a real movie character in the 1930s. He was a dark-skinned, tall black man who danced. He was a professional dancer, a tall, dark-skinned black man who appeared in many Shirley Temple movies, and he danced. He was a slave. He played the role of a slave, and he danced, smiling and dancing. Don Lemon is the 21st century Mr. Bojangles for CNN. They're not going to fire him. They're not going to fire him. I'm sure President Obama is very happy to see how Don Lemon makes the black race look bad in America. President Obama probably is elated at Don Lemon's responses and his actions and his behavior. But I'm not. Sign the petition at change.org, please. Please sign the petition at change.org. Thank you for tuning in to Black Political Buzz. Have a blessed day and goodbye.